the tariffs that have been slapped against India by the US. Now we're getting some more updates. This is the latest statement that has come in from US advisor Kevin Hassett amid the India-US tariff tensions. He goes on to say, and I'm quoting, "If India won't budge, Trump won't either." So this is a rather stark statement, a controversial one also at that has been made by Kevin Hassett. He's the director of National Economic Council of the United States. He, while speaking to reporters, has said that US President Donald Trump won't be offering a concession on the 50% tariffs that have been slapped against India, which come into effect from today should India continue buying oil at cheaper rates from Russia. Let's take a look.
It is a complicated relationship, that it's integrated some with the problems that we're trying to put extra pressure on Russia so that we can get a peace deal to save millions of lives, and the Indian intransigence about opening their markets to our products. And so I think that when you're looking at trade negotiations, one thing I think we've all learned is that you need to keep your eyes on the horizon and recognize that there are going to be ebbs and flows in things before we reach the final position.
My colleague Akanksha Swaroop is joining us on the broadcast. Akanksha, how does one read these statements? Back to back, they continue to come in. That brazening stance from the United States doesn't stop. However, that very stark discrepancy when dealing between India and China has been made evidently clear time and again.
Absolutely. And in fact, remember, as far as Kevin Hassett's, in fact, Peter Navarro's own statement is reeking of this kind of double speak. It is not just unfair, but it's rather preposterous and ludicrous that India or New Delhi is being blamed for the war in Ukraine, given that China already is one of the largest buyers. And in fact, to quote their hypocrisy, EU, which happens to be at the helm of NATO, has been buying gas from the Russians for the longest time. In fact, another NATO ally, that happens to be Turkey, is one of the buyers of Russian crude and gas as well. So the question is, why only question India? And that, of course, brings in the US administration's newfound interest in Pakistan itself. But that's a story for a different day. What Peter Navarro has gone on to say is that the road to peace in Ukraine is via New Delhi, and that Prime Minister Modi is responsible, or this is Prime Minister Modi's war in Ukraine, is rather unfair. Because, look, it was the US President who was, till days ago, hosting Vladimir Putin in Alaska. He was rather given a red-carpeted welcome ever since he stepped down from his aircraft. And this when he was labeled till days ago as a war criminal by the United States itself. And it just goes on to say that for US to witness or be bearing testimony to the kind of time-tested allies that we have been with Moscow is not going down with the US President. And the fact that the Indian Prime Minister is not going to be backing down with this threat of the additional 25% tariff, a message that's been made amply clear by Prime Minister Modi when he said that the mantra for the Indian economy is going to be self-reliance or Atmanirbharta, and that these additional tariffs are not going to change India's growth story. Prime Minister has made that amply clear. We are already on our way to be diversifying our needs, whether it is in Africa or Australia or EU. In fact, EU leaders are already reaching out to India.
Absolutely. And Akanksha, the fact that Kevin Hassett goes on to make it like a tug of war. If India doesn't budge, then US won't either. How does one see this statement? And considering this has been made at a geopolitical stage, rather irresponsible one at that, talking about how this tug of war will continue if India doesn't stop buying Russian oil.
I agree how you highlighted Kevin Hassett's statement. Because this comes soon after the White House trade advisor Peter Navarro made that statement about how the Ukraine war is Prime Minister Modi's war. And remember, Hassett has a very important role to play in the US Trump administration. He's the director of the National Economic Council of the United States. And when he's telling reporters that the U.S. president will not offer any concession or 50% tariffs should India continue buying oil at cheaper rates from Russia, is only indicating that this war is now just begun as far as the trade war is concerned.
Okay.
And as someone who's been tracking Donald Trump very closely, I can tell you it's reminiscent of Trump's previous administration when he had waged the trade war against China. And so we'll have to see how India wants to shape this entire trade war, given the timing is very critical. Prime Minister Modi is all set to head to SCO, where we will have a bilateral with China as well. So we'll have to see how India is going to soften the blow.